All right, I'm going to move your video a little bit because since you have the better positioning of the microphone, you're sitting slightly differently. So I got to reframe you a tiny. Don't move again. Just sit wherever you're going to sit. There, I got it set up.
Why don't you just do widescreen? Why you got to crop it?
Because I have to fit both of us into a little square.
I could do this.
That still works. That actually looks pretty good.
I could move the camera.
Yeah.
If you're cropping it anyway.
Yeah, I cropped the hell out of it.
You could make 16 by 9 rectangles. You don't got to make squares.
Well, they're not squares, but they're not 16 by 9 because I had to line it up with
2/3
room
or 4/3.
I needed room on the left for the browser if we're in browser mode. Anyway. All right, I'll just hit go. It's Thursday, May 26, 2022. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, we talk about trains. Choo-choo. We have only talked about trains once before.
We've talked about a lot of trains on this show.
Yeah, but not talking train games, but I want to point out that on October 23rd, 2013, we talked about Take the X Train.
That was an anime, yeah.
That was the only show that had the word train in it. Even the reviews of 18XX games don't actually say train anywhere in the title of the Geek Nights episode.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it goes. But yeah, I'm surprised, there's some things that are just so obvious. Like we had to have done an episode on that. And then of course I go and I search and I find out, it was Rim deleted that episode because it was such an obvious one. So
well, you know what it is, like
some protections in the new website to make sure this doesn't happen anymore.
You get to the point. I mean, I just sort of assume any idea I have for a Geek Nights episode, my brain just says we've definitely already done that, probably in like 2007. But some things we just never got to, or some things we zoomed way in and never talked about that topic.
Yeah. All right. Well, the people who are some reason watching a podcast, even though there's nothing to frickin' see, it's we have no visual content really.
Okay, I do show my web browser and what I'm looking at while we're talking, so the listener knows when I'm just reading Wikipedia usually.
Okay, good. That's usually what we do on this show. And the people listening, which is, I guess, you still shouldn't do that because the podcast isn't worth listening to. But if you're, that's the correct way to. Anyway, may or may not notice I bought a new microphone. Right? It showed up immediately when I ordered it because that's how professional audio video places do. You order from them and they're like, oh, they must have like a concert tomorrow. We got to get it to them stat, right? It's like,
and I can say that Scott sounds better through the Discord we use to record Geek Nights. It was noticeable, and I'm gonna do a little spectral analysis. I'll post it for the Patrons a little. I'm gonna do an analysis of Scott's old microphone versus this one. That'll be really easy to do.
The reason I bought this one wasn't necessarily for its sound quality, even though I hope the sound quality is better because it costs more money than the old microphone. But really, I bought it for the ergonomics, right? So you can see this feature where the XLR connector is separated from the microphone. So you can adjust the microphone's position without tugging on the XLR cable. So that's really great. It hangs downwards, as opposed to pointing straight in. So now that means I can sit differently. I can move the arm differently. It's better on my neck and such. And because it has this built-in windscreen, which I might replace with the Big Daddy windscreen. We'll see about that.
That thing is so big.
It is laughably large. But that means I don't need the windscreen blocking my face. So if for some reason someone really wants to see my face and bald head, I'm not hiding behind a black disc anymore. But actually, all those things aside, this microphone came with a feature I did not expect and greatly enjoy, and might cause me to buy the microphone again, or maybe return it and keep buying new ones if I can get away with it, is that this microphone has the smell.
Wait, magic card smell?
A brand new NES cartridge.
Ooh.
It smells good.
If someone can make a cologne that smells like that accurately, they'll be a billionaire.
I'll order it right now. Let's see. Does that exist? NES.
If it exists, I'm buying it too.
Cologne. The Legend of Zelda NES cartridge air freshener.
No, there's no way.
Denines Very Gentle Cologne. That's baby cologne.
I'm looking for perfume instead, just in case.
Game On. What is this?
I don't think anyone has. Wait, there's NES soap, but it doesn't look like it smells like an NES.
Cartridge coaster. No, that's not it. I want cologne, not coasters. Yeah.
You know, the problem is to make that smell, it probably consists of carcinogens.
Of course, it's some kind of plastic.
Vox, lots of volatile organic compounds.
I mean, cinnamon is a volatile organic compound, right? So don't come at me with that kind of.
It's a pretty good microphone.
Yeah, it's an ancient this microphone's been in production since like the 70s, right? So
not quite as long as the SM57. You up until this point at home, you were using the same microphone that Lyndon Baines Johnson used as president of the United States.
Well, I think the reason they don't use this one is because it would look kind of silly when you're standing at a lectern.
Oh yeah, I remember I was trying to because we bought the SM57 because with the president used it, of course it's good enough. And it was cheap. It was way cheaper than fancier mics. Yeah. But then we discovered when I did some research, because I'd finally figured out why the president of the United States used that microphone from Lyndon Baines Johnson through Barack Obama. Yep. Pure aesthetics. The SM58 would have been better at being the president's microphone, but someone thought the 57 looked better on TV and film. Yeah. That was the sole determination.
Oh yeah, but for anyone who can't see, this is the one I got is the Shure Sm7b, and I expect there's really no upgrading from this. Like this is if I've podcasted for 16 years, it doesn't look like we're gonna stop.
I mean, what microphones? So the microphones you've used for Geek Nights, not counting like the Logitech stick microphone and those shitty Radio Shacks from the early days. We used the SM57. Then we upgraded, and Scott was using, I think, a Beta 58A. And then eventually I started using the Beta 87A, and now Scott's on this, which is weirdly enough.
I was using the 57 again when I started podcasting from my apartment.
Also, I had to get the Beta 58A that you were using repaired because the inside of it rusted from so many years of podcasting.
Well, I don't think that'll happen to this one.
I don't think so.
Because the shape of it, it's not going to happen, right? So
yeah, but there's no better. I don't think there's going to be a better microphone for you because we're not recording music.
I don't think it's a better microphone just for podcasting, period. It's like, what can you possibly get that would, why?
I mean, other than highly specialized things like things for on a stage or a bad acoustic environment, but it's a pretty good looking microphone, pretty good sounding microphone. But I will post some screenshots of the differences between the two in a spectral analysis because I do have to remake the Geek Nights pipeline, at least the Scott part of the pipeline, to make sure the audio levels mix in nicely. And I got to change the noise profile because I have an old noise profile for you. But that's just part of what it takes to make a podcast. In the news, of course, there were so many mass shootings, like we don't even need to talk about them. But there is
the Onion story. Just roll it again, right?
Yep. No way to prevent this.
Prevent this says only country where this regularly happens.
So what I want to talk about is an orthogonal story that broke today. And this is not even related to the 3 mass shootings that happened in the last few days. This is a sea change in what kills children in the United States, because as of now, guns kill more American kids than cars do. That is a huge statistic.
They're only counting children who died because they were directly hit by a car or were in a car when the car.
Oh yeah, that doesn't even count all the kids who die as the externalities of air pollution from cars, stress from cars, lack of access to a car because there aren't any other ways to get around in most of America.
I mean, you could think about it this way, right? There's so many ways a car can indirectly kill a child, right? Maybe their parents die in a car crash, and now the child is unsupported and orphaned, and then because of that, they die from something else, right? It's like that would never show up in the statistics as the kid died because of a car crash, even though if it was not a car dominant society, the child would be alive, and right.
Which speaks to
you can think of so many such scenarios.
But this speaks to a broader point about America and the Republican Party in America, and it ties into not just this problem, but also what happened with COVID and what happens with car deaths and everything. there has been a conservative strategy in America for decades that is continuing to bear fruit, where you normalize something that shouldn't be normalized. And once you get it to the point to where people assume they can't do anything about it, they stop trying to do anything about it, and then you win. That happened with cars. Like, I've talked on the GeekNights before. Every other weekend or so, Emily and I go hiking or camping, like way upstate, so we drive out of the city in a car. And I have seen what is clearly a fatal, like, collision probably 5 times on those trips. 5 times in 3 years. That's terrifying. On average, 1 person dies per day just on those roads. And yet, that's not a major news story. That's endemic. Most people just accept that as part of the world. They don't think that hard about it. Or they rationalize it as cars. You need a car. What are you going to do without a car? COVID.
And these deaths, right? Everyone's going to die. It's a premature death, right?
Yeah.
Someone dies before they had to. They could have had a longer, better life and brought more joy.
How many human years do cars just erase from the world?
But it's different from, it's like if you die because of lightning, it's like, yeah, there's nothing we can really do about that. It's like, we can have lightning rods and stuff.
Which we do. We require lightning rods on buildings. Like, we teach kids about lightning.
Lightning is going to kill people and we can't stop lightning from happening.
Yep.
Right? But cars are the transportation infrastructure is purely something that we have. It is of our own making.
Yep.
And it is entirely within human power to dictate all the terms of it. It's not the laws of physics where it's like, well, nothing we can do about that third law. It's like, right? Every human law can be anything, right? It's like people, I think lack imagination because they're always focused on the reality of what the government is, what the current laws are, and how hard it is to change them based on, what country you live in and what your, whether you're democracy, autocracy, or whatever, right? But laws can be anything, right? You could, if you made a new country, it's like any idea that you could have could be the law.
Might not be a good idea, but
no. But it's like it could be anything.
But that's why the language I like to use around this is to say that every person in America who dies by car, that was a choice made by society. Society chose to kill that person.
Yeah, indirectly, right? Or even if they didn't chose to kill them, you could say that they didn't care. They allowed. They just didn't care, or they chose to allow for the conditions in which that occurred.
So same thing is happening.
However you want to put it, none of them are good.
So the same thing is happening with COVID. As COVID becomes to the point where it's just going to be endemic, that was kind of the strategy from the right all along. Make it an unsolvable problem so that people stop trying to solve it and just, I almost said live with it, but of course it kills people, just accept it. And the fascinating thing is that there is a scant argument for at least cars and COVID in the current environment that it's very difficult to deal with them for a lot of practical reasons. That's not to say we shouldn't have tried and shouldn't still try, but there's a lot of practical reasons that slow that down. But guns are different in that nobody needs a gun to get to their, to drive to get to school. Like, guns don't do anything.
Right. These other systems that we have, right? It's like we need a transportation system, how you want to design it, right? How it functions, who pays for it, etc. All those things can be discussed, but I don't think anyone's going to say we don't need any transportation technology deployed in any means. Everyone will just walk or run everywhere with their own, ability.
Yeah, there is one guy on a fixie with a whistle and lots of tattoos who says that.
Right.
Nobody else says that.
Society cannot function without some sort of, transportation technologies.
Yep.
And as soon as you have transportation systems, they need some sort of governance or regulation to prevent chaos, right? Whatever technologies they are. Even if we invented teleporters, we would need some sort of, federal teleportation authority.
Even in Star Trek, the Federation has the concept of credits, so some jackass doesn't just constantly teleport everywhere all the time at everyone else's expense.
Right, like, oh, I'm never gonna walk. If I have to move 2 feet, I'll teleport. I'll teleport to the counter to get my snack, and then to pay the cashier, and then teleport back to my seat. It's like, no, you can walk that.
Electricity
the energy
is very similar. We need electricity. That is like a fundamental aspect of humanity in the modern era. But there is no good way to make electricity. Every way has pros and cons. So we agree we need electricity. So we have to have a conversation as a society about where and how to make that electricity and what externalities are we willing to accept as a society. But guns, we don't have to accept.
Yeah, guns have very, very limited necessity, right? It's like the vast majority of people and societies and places do not need any guns for anything, anytime whatsoever. They're a useless item for almost everybody. The only people who need to have a gun, right, would be like a
military.
You could even right. If you need a military, we can discuss that too.
Right? I would argue it is very difficult to be pacifist in the current world.
As long as another country has a military, your country needs a military.
Yeah.
And then, right, hunt certain kinds of hunting. I guess you can't hunt with a bow. You're gonna need some kind of weapon to do the hunting, right? And a gun is often the best choice.
But even there, we could as a society say bolt-action single-shot rifles are the only allowable guns, which are fine for hunting.
There are
maybe shotguns
guns
for bird hunting as well, and that's it.
Yeah, like a duck, right? Yeah, it's like you're not going to bow hunt for ducks.
I mean, people do. I have a relative who does.
That's fucking badass.
That same relative, Scott, he hunts deer for subsistence. You know how he hunts them? He doesn't use a gun. He thinks guns are for babies. He doesn't even use a bow. He stalks them with a knife.
That's fucking nasty.
Right? Yeah, he's an interesting dude.
Good luck stalking a duck with a knife. Yeah, a deer maybe if you're like, fucking, a ninja or something.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, the point is that even for hunting, the guns you need for hunting, right, are a certain set of guns, right? A few shotguns for, ducks, birds, whatever, right? And then even if you wanted to hunt a moose, it's like there is a gun that would be appropriate for that. And in our society, first of all, handguns are appropriate. I don't know that much about guns and hunting, but I know that a handgun is the appropriate weapon for hunting almost nothing.
Nope. The only cases I am aware of on Earth for handguns and hunting is usually people who want to be able to mercifully finish an animal off that they wounded once they get up close to it.
Okay, good one. Yeah. Okay. But
also a lot of people shoot themselves that way because most people have no fucking idea how to use a handgun.
Right. Now, for that use case, though, you would never need a handgun that has
more than one shot at a time.
Any kind of rapid fire mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
At all, right? It could be a slow, right? Lousy handgun. It doesn't even need to be accurate at range because you're getting close to some animals.
I mean, actually, you could replace the handgun with a captive bolt gun. That's what they use to. That's what they use to murder cattle. It's basically a gun.
I thought that the cattle ones, though, were usually like, pneumatic or hydraulic or something.
Oh, yeah, but there are gun-powered...
You carry a compressor around with you.
Well, did you ever see No Country for Old Men?
Yeah, but I don't remember most of it.
Well, that's literally one of the main plot devices is the one crazy guy carries a cattle gun and a compressor around with him everywhere.
Okay, but anyway,
there are percussive ones too. And there
are devices that are needed by nobody unless they intend to murder other humans, and therefore we should disallow their manufacture, sale, whatever, to the extent possible.
It's even worse than that. If one would argue that a police force needs guns, well, I want to point out that in the most recent school shooting, the cops who were there before...
Well, we can talk about that. It's a whole nother
All we'll say is the cops who were there, go read what happened and what those cops did. They refused to go in because they were afraid of getting shot. So they waited until the guy basically offed himself, and then they went in after he'd killed all the kids.
Right. Could you imagine, right, a house on fire and the fire department... sometimes the fire department won't go in because that's the right thing to do, depending on the fire and the situation. But can you imagine the fire department not going in when it's the right thing to do because they're afraid to go in?
No, my dad was a fireman. My grandfather was a fireman, and What I'll say is that both of them lost a lot of friends because firefighters charged into burning buildings to save kids.
That's right. So,
and the one thing my dad said to me when I was really young and I was like figuring out careers, and they don't tell you what careers there are. And a lot of kids are like, I could be a fireman or a police officer. And I remember what my dad said was, nobody says, fuck the fire department and spray paints it on a wall.
That's right. I mean, we often complain about the police pointing to the horrible things that they do, right? Beating up peaceful protesters, harassing churro ladies, right? Et cetera. And I think more needs to be said about
what they don't
do, which is their job. They don't do what they're supposed to do.
They didn't help me get my stolen bike back. They don't do anything.
Right. Whether it's a job, large or small, the things that the police are supposed to be doing that we say are within the things we want them to do, they don't do those things.
I saw a great commentary.
They're cowards.
Remember when the Republican coup on January 6th, and there was that one black cop who saved a bunch of senators. There's a video about it. I saw a really fascinating...
doing what he was supposed to do. Good job.
In the commentary, there was an op-ed in WAPO, and it was basically like, that story made the rounds and resonated because that is a shocking behavior for a police officer that is rarely seen.
Yeah, because think about how many, right? It's like, yes, the police on January 6th, the Capitol Police, were outnumbered, right, by a great deal, right? But, there's stories about a handful of them who did what they were supposed to do.
Yep.
All the rest did not, it's like they might have done something. Some of them were like, there were those videos and like waving people in and shit, right? It's like the vast majority of them did not do their job. Right. So.
But of course, today, a little while ago, the U.S.
people who don't do their job, you want to give guns to those people.
The Republicans in the U.S. Senate filibustered dead the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act that would have restricted guns and investigated things like police for white supremacy. They filibustered it dead. This wasn't even a bill for the current shooting. This was the bill for the other shooting that happened a little while ago.
So no matter how you want to interpret it, right? The point is that Republicans,
are the leading cause of death for children in America now.
Right? They are, basically in favor, right, of domestic terrorism. They want domestic terrorism to happen. They do not want government resources being used to prevent you from dying. They would rather, if given two choices, no matter what their logic is or reason for it, they have chosen that the government should not spend resources. They think that is more important than you not dying from a person with a gun if you're in the United States. Given those two priorities, they chose the priority of government spends less money. So there you go. They care about government spending less money more than they care about you dying from a domestic terrorist before you would normally die by natural causes.
So, not to, but anyway, but in some other news, we're going to talk about Twitter, but for once, it's not to talk about the technology directly.
Or any social media biz.
It's not some tweet.
Yep. So what happened here is that, we've talked about on the show, especially on Monday episodes, about two-factor authentication, right? And how you should use it for everything, as much as possible, even if it's a hassle. Right? Because of security reasons. You don't want anyone stealing your accounts.
Yep.
If you do it properly and you have your backup codes, right, you won't lose your account and you'll never have to worry about, anybody busting, quote unquote, hacking your Instagram.
Yep.
Right. But if you're doing two-factor authentication, you want to do it using TOTP, which is Google Authenticator with the 6-digit codes, right? Or any other equivalent app. Or you want to do it with a physical device or biometric thing like a YubiKey or fingerprint thing.
Or the out-of-band verification like what Blizzard does where there's like an app and you hit a button that says, yes, that was me.
That's just TOTP.
Yeah.
Guard is also they're all just effectively the same as TOTP, but also the Apple ones, right? Your Face IDs, your Touch IDs, those are okay as well, right? But you do not want to use the SMS one where they text you a number and you then type that number in.
Yeah, we've talked about it at length. It doesn't work. It's completely insecure. If you're using SMS for two-factor, you might as well be using nothing. It probably makes you less secure than nothing.
Now, what Twitter did here, is evil, right, and bad. And what they did is they had people sign up for two-factor auth using their. You got to give them your phone number so you can get text messages, obviously, right? And then when people did that, if you read the privacy documents and terms of service and whatever, it says give us your phone number for two-factor auth. We're only going to use your phone number for two-factor auth, right? We're not going to use it for any shenanigans. But in fact, they did use it for shenanigans. If you gave them your phone number in order to do two-factor SMS authentication, there was a period of time in which they were using those phone numbers for tracking, for advertising, even though you had given them your phone number under another pretense, which was security. And the FTC said, we caught you, pay a bunch of money. You done wrong.
Now, this is pathetic because Twitter is being fined a pittance. It's a one-time fine of $150 million. That rounds down to zero.
Twitter, they're not doing that well.
They're not doing well, but that still rounds down to zero, even by the kinds of budgets I work with at work. But
it'll get Twitter to stop, though, which is the right?
But I want to point out, if this had happened in Europe with the GDPR, the fine would not have been $150 million. The fine would have been
euros.
20 million pounds, which is a lot less than $150 million, or 4% of the annual worldwide revenue from the preceding financial year of that company, whichever is greater. So if you're a big company, they charge you 4% of your revenue.
I like that.
I like it a lot. There's some parts of the GDPR that are a little
but
percentage,
but I like the concept.
Oh yeah, this should be a $15 million fine for Twitter, a $50 billion fine. Just shut Twitter down.
Yeah, but yeah. So this is the point here: is that this is yet another reason not to use SMS for authentication, or not only that, but do not give any company more of your accurate, personally identifying information than is necessary, right? So if you're buying something from a store, you're going to have to give them your name and address to get the things shipped to you, right? There's no way around that. So give them accurate info, right?
Yeah. But if they ask for your social security number, do not fucking give it to them.
Right. If it's an optional field, do not fill it in. Just don't fill it in if it's optional ever, because it can only help them. It doesn't benefit you in any way to give more info that is not necessary.
Plus, they'll figure it out.
If you go to a video game website and it says, what's your birthday? We can only show
January 1, 1900.
Right. It's like, you can put in any old birthday. Why would you tell someone your actual birthday, right? It's like, there's no benefit to you. Putting in any old date that gets you in to see the whatever.
In fact, I put fake birthdays into everything to the point that it's actually polluted the public records about me. A few years ago, I got a spam that made it through the spam filters. But what was notable is it was a company that was like "Happy Birthday" something, and it listed a very specific birthday that I had put into one website and only one website. So I know who sold them my information.
Yeah. But also you can, with the birthday thing, a lot of companies like to send you coupons or other bonus things on your birthday. If you spread out those dates, and remember, only putting in a date if they require you to tell them your birthday, right? But if you spread out those dates and put them at appropriate times, you can get stuff all the time.
Yeah. Or I remember more than once when I was poor, I would casually mention I was out with a group of friends at a restaurant that it was someone's birthday, and often the restaurant would give us a little bit of free food.
Free cakes.
That's real important when you're poor in college.
They might want to look at someone's driver's license, though.
I found that in practice, no, they don't really care enough to do so, but like Starbucks will check.
Don't do it at the same restaurant too frequently.
Nope.
But yeah, don't give out your personally identifying information more than absolutely necessary.
All right. Time for things of the day. But anyway, things of the day. So check this out. You may remember that I used one of the better Eurovision entries from one of the better Eurovisions, Subwoofer's song, the Grandma Banana Yum Yum song with the wolf. And Subwoofer has put out an official video This is the last I'm going to talk about this video on Geek Nights, this music video. They put out an official video that is the full instructions for how to do the dance in the video. And it's a very instructive, easy to follow video to like, you could learn this dance. I think I'm going to learn it. It's not more complicated than the Mambaleo.
Okay.
If you want to learn the Yum Yum dance.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay. So there's this Instagram account, One Breath Diver. It's an Instagram account belonging to someone named Jules Casey. They are a free diver and scuba diver and an award-winning photographer in Australia, according to their Instagram profile. And, you know, the whole Instagram account, I guess, could be considered a thing of the day because all these amazing photos of, you know, under the sea creatures of various kinds. And these are really good photos going on here. But in particular, this one video of some scallop guys, right? And, you know, I mean, you've probably seen a scallop, right? Like after it's been taken out of the ocean. You've probably seen one after it's taken out of its shell, just like a little white disc of deliciousness, right? But a living scallop that's still, you know, doing its thing is not something I've seen too often, right? And in this video, you can see some little scallops alive under the sea, and you can see how they move. It's like they don't just sit in one spot their whole life, right? They move around. How do they move around? In a very entertaining manner. That's how. Watch and be entertained.
In the meta moment. Put a little marker here. The Geek Nights Book Club book remains 9 Fox Gambit. I think we can do this on the next Thursday show. I'm going to be done with this book like imminently. Okay. Got a lot to say about it. I like it. Definitely reading the sequels.
You know, that's how you always do it. I feel like I could pick any series. Like if I did fucking Babysitter's Club book 1, Rim would be like, after that book club.
As a kid, Rim
would be like, I'm on Babysitter's Book Club 100.
As a kid, I got pretty deep into the Boxcar Children.
Boxcar Kids? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember Boxcar Children, but I do remember, you know, Hardy Boys. I just read a few random ones here and there.
I read a few of the old ones, and as a kid, I didn't like them that much. But there was a re-release, like a modernized Hardy Boys that was released when I was in, I want to say, late elementary school, and it was hardcore and modern, and there was guns and spies, and I was real into that. I read like 15 of those things.
There was, I keep forgetting the guy's name every time. That it comes up, but there was this guy who wrote like a whole bunch of sports fiction. I'm sure I've mentioned it on the show before.
Yes, you have mentioned it on the show before when we were talking about reading classes in school.
Weren't a series, they were all just these individual books, right? And then there was also, of course, you know, because I was there right before the sort of Goosebumps Animorphs type kids, they came after me. Right? But I was reading some, not just the Hardy Boys. What were the other ones? There was the
Nancy Drew, Encyclopedia Brown,
and there was some. Anyway, meta moment. Read this other book, 9 Fox Gambit, and also the Geek Nights website is coming along nice. Oh, Matt Christopher, that's the guy who did the sports books. Yep, Matt Christopher, that's the one. Anyway,
all right. So trains, we actually think a lot about trains in our daily life. Trains are really important to me.
Such a significant part of our lives, and we've done episodes about so many other train things, and I'm sure we've talked about it during newses and whatnot, but we've never done a main bit on trains, so now is the time.
So trains, I think, are one of the most important things to invest in as humans to help address the existential crisis of climate change. Trains are more important now than they have been in 100 years, I think.
You know, I mean, well, trains were super important when they were first invented, you know, the steam engine and whatnot.
They were really the first efficient way to travel long distances over land in the history of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, before trains, if you wanted to go over land, right, it's like it's like Oregon Trail. You know, it's like getting a wagon and takes you fucking forever, right? So not only could a train get people, but also goods a long way very quickly. And
it's really funny. When I was a kid, like a kid brain, before I went to school and learned stuff, I always thought that there was this evolution of transportation. And I thought that like walking led to scooters, led to bikes, led to motorcycles, led to cars, led to trains. I thought trains were like the next step from cars. It was not until I went to school that I learned that cars came later.
Yep.
Because trains just seem more impressive and more useful.
Well,
even to my kid brain.
They can go faster, right?
Yep.
But I guess the one downside of the train that car people always talk about is, the freedom of the open road. The train can only go where the tracks go, right?
Yep. But I would say that is
a revolution that once the train was invented, they built tracks like mad, right? They're just like, oh my God, trains. And we had to build tracks everywhere to the point in which they were, enslaving people and all sorts of horrible things just to get more tracks going to more places.
Any old city in America, under almost every street are buried tons of old tram and train tracks from the pre-car era. But also this whole idea that, people can go anywhere in a car, but if a train, they can't. Society built itself around trains before there were cars. The idea was, if you built a train somewhere, the fact that it's only on those rails is really important. There's an idea of infrastructure inertia, where once the track is there, it's hard to move it or get rid of it. So if someone builds a track somewhere, it makes a lot of sense for towns to grow around where there's stations on those tracks. So the map of the train network caused the map of cities and humans existing in America, just like how before trains, rivers caused that. That's why every old city is on a river.
Yep. It's like, hey, you might have a place where no one can live, maybe not because it's not a livable place, but because no one can get there. A train track, it's going from A to B, happens to pass that place. Someone, can get out there. Just one person gets out there, build a train station. The track is there, right? And suddenly you have, settlement happening, right? It's like, is it a problem that the train doesn't go everywhere? It's like, just live where there's a train station, or live where there's a track and build a train station.
Yep. Or have an alternate means of transportation, not to get everywhere you're going, but to get to the nearest train station.
Yeah, it's, But yeah, so, a train is really just it has a schedule. You can't necessarily always go when you want, but it's it'll get you there when you need, right? And if more people were using train and more was invested in train, there would be more trains that are bigger and faster and more on time, going to more places, right? Whereas instead, in the United States at least, we have less trains going less places, to the point at which we have rail trails all over the place of where there used to be a train, but there isn't anymore because the track is unused because it was replaced by trucks or whatever.
But the worst part is all those rail trails,
nice hiking trail in the woods.
I like them, but people have this idea that the tracks weren't necessary anymore or wouldn't be useful, and that's why they turned them into rail trails. No, if they ran trains on those tracks instead, those trains would be packed. They just stopped running the trains.
Yep, pretty much.
I mean, there was a big fight, and we even talked about this on Geek Nights back in 2006 when we lived in Beacon, because there was a big plan to have Metro North, which is the commuter rail for downstate New York to get into New York City. The Metro North Railroad along the Hudson River only goes all the way up to Poughkeepsie, and that's where it stops. If you want to go further north, there's no commuter rail.
You got to use Amtrak, which is not a commuter train. It's a different train.
There are tons of people who commute to New York City from further north than Poughkeepsie. Terrifying numbers of people. So what they do is they drive all the way down to Poughkeepsie and park in Poughkeepsie at the end of the line, and then get on a train.
The whole way.
Yep, if they live far enough north. So there was a plan to just extend Metro North, 3 more stations north. They proved that those trains would be completely full. It would get a huge number of cars off the road. And all the little dipshit towns north of Poughkeepsie, their local municipal governments blocked it because they didn't want to make the commute easier, because they were worried that, and you can read between the lines what they were actually worried about, city people might live up here.
Yep.
Never mind the fact that
they're not. It's if you're worried about noise, why are you? You're not. You're clearly, that's a lie, because you have cars driving all over the place, making way more noise than trains.
But never mind that those towns only exist because all the people who live there drive to Poughkeepsie to work in the city anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are all U.S. train problems, right? If you look elsewhere in the world, right?
There's trains everywhere.
Right. Especially like Japan, China, right? It's like they got
Europe.
trains everywhere, right? China probably even goes too far with it, right? They'll just like, oh, we want to build a train here, knocking down all your houses. Bye.
Yep.
Right? Move over there. We're making trains. But the trains work, right? They're efficient. They're powerful. They're economically, it makes sense, a lot of sense. And they got newer, faster, better, safer trains in every conceivable way, right? They got freaking bullet trains. And it's like, when I was a kid, it's like, not riding too many trains when I was a kid, other than, the occasional, like.
I remember the first time I rode a bullet train in Japan with Emily, and it's even one of the older, slow ones. What I rode has nothing on the newer trains in China in the year 2022. Yep. This train, I remember it got faster and faster and faster, and hit a point where I thought, damn, this is crazy fast. And it had a lot more getting faster to do that I did not realize.
Yep. And it's like, hey, train technology has advanced incredibly. It's like, sure, bicycle is always going to be the most efficient in terms of energy per whatever, but you can't move that amount of stuff with a bicycle, right? It's like you need a freight train sometimes. You need a passenger train, or a mixed train or something, for certain loads. It's like that's the best way. You can fit more containers on some mega freight train than
but even worse,
on an airplane.
It's most of the things that make trains faster are not technological problems. Americans think trains are slow. And the American trains actually could go a lot faster. We just haven't invested in repairing and replacing old tracks. Like even our Acela, the fastest train in America, it could go like 2 or 3 times faster if we bulldozed a small number of NIMBY houses in like a few parts of the Northeast so the tracks could be made better. Those trains are already capable of going way faster than they do today. They're basically America's bullet trains,
and even if those upgrades were made, those trains would still be slow and sad compared to the bullet trains of the rest of the world.
But even those slow bullet trains, if we used our slow bullet trains effectively in America, you could commute from Albany or Philadelphia to New York City on a train faster than you can drive there from like a little bit upstate. It's kind of terrifying that we have not built trains in this country, and I hate it.
Anyway, but yeah, when I was a kid, it's like I knew about bullet trains. It's like you saw imagery of bullet trains, but I never saw one like in person. Like it was weird that bullet trains were a thing that like we knew about from like books and photos and video or TV.
Oh,
I don't know.
Forget bullet trains. I never rode a train that was not a toy, like a steam engine in an amusement park, until I moved to New York.
Oh, I did because I would take the train to.
I lived in Michigan. There were no trains anywhere. No train could take me.
We also took Amtrak to Florida.
We drove to Florida. Or we flew to Florida.
We also drove to Florida.
Yep. But there weren't trains where I grew up. So as a young kid, I also had this perception, like, I only ever saw old-timey trains because they were always, like, historical trains. I didn't see or freight trains. Didn't see, like, modern passenger trains in person until I came to New York.
Like, even though I did ride trains on occasion when I was young, it's like I was always disappointed. I was like, these, they were still fun because it's still kids and trains.
Oh, yeah.
Times, right? But I was like, I knew bullet trains existed even pre-internet somehow, and I'm like, where are they? Where did they go? How come I can't ride them? Why don't we use the bullet train? Where is it? Where in New York City there must be a bullet train there.
You'd think.
Not anywhere in the United States is there a modern train.
If there was a bullet train in New York, we could get like upstate faster than flying.
Yep. I guess bullet train is an unfortunate name, but
no. Considering
modern train. That's all right. I still haven't ridden one, even after, this much of my life is over. I still have not ridden on a modern train because I haven't gone to any of the countries that have them.
Yep. But I think what's most important about trains is, aside from, all the energy efficiency and the infrastructure inertia and everything, it's that I don't have that much time to live. And before I lived in a place where I didn't have to drive, I spent a lot of time piloting a car, and you can only do so much that is not driving when you're driving. You can listen to a podcast, listen to some music, maybe have a not super intense conversation with someone, and that's about it. You're basically wasting that time.
Yeah, it's like if you drive somewhere for an hour, right? You get an hour older. That's almost the same as just dying an hour sooner.
I would rather take a train somewhere that takes 3 hours than drive somewhere in an hour, because sure, that 3 hours, I am limited what I can do, but you know what? I'm sitting on a train with my laptop and my Switch and my phone and some snacks. That's what the fuck I'm doing at home anyway.
Yeah, and it's, unlike, people can attempt on an airplane to join the Mile High Club, but on a train, right? You can get on a,
I'm in that I'm in the train club. I am absolutely in the train club.
Yeah, proper trains have cabins. You can get it on a train.
I have done that. Full disclosure, that has happened on multiple occasions.
I'm just saying, you can do it, right? It's like
you can do it on Amtrak.
It's okay to do it, unlike on an airplane where you can get caught and get in trouble.
So get this. You know how Emily and I usually, if we go visit her family out in Leroy.
Expected.
So we could fly to Leroy, which is near Buffalo, like way upstate by RIT. Flying, it's about an hour flight. Actually, it's like a 45-minute flight, plus an hour to get to the airport, plus an hour of security bullshit and waiting, plus getting from the airport in a car that I have to rent all the way over. Or we could take like a 6.5-hour Amtrak in a private car with 2 beds and internet and holes and a private toilet, or a giant room with a shower and stuff in it. And those rooms cost, the difference between a regular economy ticket on Amtrak and an economy ticket plus being in that room is less than the cost of a flight.
Yeah. Depends where you're going, but yeah.
Well, when you're going, those trains, those sleeper cars are only on a few lines. So you know what they're not on? The lines that go from here to like DC. Because if there were sleeper cars to DC, I would go to MagFest in a sleeper car.
Sure. But I mean, there's also trains out there that are like, there's a train out in California that has special cars with like,
I've ridden in those.
Sides.
I rode in one of those when way back we went to PAX for PAX, and then Scott left, and I had to speak
train.
Yeah.
And you look out the window, and it's like the train ride itself becomes, a special, it's now, a special thing in and of itself. It's not just a means of getting from here to there.
The seats are sideways, facing
more like it's almost approaching like a cruise where it's like, it's getting you here to there, but it's also itself a destination.
It's amazing. The seats are sideways and you're facing giant panoramic windows. And usually there's little lookout towers that you can climb up into.
Yeah. But it's like their train tracks specifically go past beautiful scenic vistas that you're looking at. Right?
I only rode those once, but way back we were at that PAX West, and after you went home, I had a lecturing gig at I think Kaifu in Portland. So they paid for me to take a fancy Amtrak to Portland from Seattle, and I enjoyed that vista, and it was fantastic, and I'd like to do it again someday.
Even if you don't have the vista, right? It's like, you think about like old school train, like, Murder on the Orient Express, right? It's like a moving dinner party. Right?
I bought a ticket to take the Orient Express to Istanbul many, many years ago. Because I was doing some travel for work and I was going all around Europe and all this stuff. And I looked and I was like, you know what? It's actually not really much more expensive than flying. I'll just use some vacation days. And I was going to take the Orient Express to Istanbul.
But you didn't.
I didn't, because the coup attempt happened in Turkey. It failed. And I canceled my trip, and I haven't been to Turkey since. And because I wasn't going to Turkey, I had to curtail that whole trip. So I just went to Germany and I canceled everything else.
All right. Well,
and then I never had an excuse to go back, and then there's COVID, and the Orient Express goes through some troubled lands these days, so it's a different situation than it was back then.
So I guess the last thing train-wise, right, is that there's this huge, a nerdery around trains.
Oh, as a kid, I was obsessed with model railroads, and I was also obsessed with actual trains.
It's true for cars too, right? You got your Hot Wheels and you got your, hot rods and car nerds, right? You got your airplane nerds doing flight simulator and all that, right? But train nerds, it's like there's nerds for every kind of transportation, boat nerds too. But the train nerds somehow seem different and apart from the other transportation nerds.
Oh, yeah.
right? In some kind of way.
The train nerds, what I find is
It's like it's hard to put my finger on exactly what it is, because it's like there's people who make model airplanes, people who do model trains, people who go to the airport and watch planes take off, people who go to the train station and watch trains come and go, right? It's like everything. There's no particular thing that you can say train nerds are doing that other forms of transport.
But yeah, if you add them all up, the train nerds stand apart, and we all know this.
There's some sort of aesthetic and attitude and, behavior of the train nerds that is different from the other transportation nerds.
One thing I noticed as a kid, because I was really into trains, and one friend of the family, like one of the dads, he was one of those come into my basement train dads, and he had the whole
quite a few of those,
the whole basement setup, and I was obsessed with it.
Basement, there's a non-zero chance I would be that.
Non-zero. There is a 1 chance that I would have that.
Oh, well, okay.
Because I had as a kid, I had HO gauge, and I had a bunch of different gauge model railroads. The tiny ones.
That was just in an oval on a flat board, and it was.
I had switching mechanisms and everything. I had all these hardcover books on like train nonsense. But one thing one of the aspects of the train nerds that seems hyper specific focus is there's this extreme attention to detail that I don't see in those other hobbies, like extreme attention to detail in terms of period accuracy and operational and logistical accuracy. Case in point, every train nerd, the highlight of their setup, if they're a basement train nerd with the basement setup, in my experience, I don't know, someone might correct me and they have a different experience, is the complicated switching mechanisms and showing off all the ways they can route the trains and simulate the real routing that happens in the real world. Like activating and deactivating the switching and the signaling is something like most of the flight nerds I know don't like the flight sim people, they don't necessarily simulate the full ground control, air traffic control experience. They mostly simulate the operating the plane experience.
No, there's those people who are online who are like pretending to be flight control.
There's a subset. I would say that subset of airplane people are nearly identical to train people. I just think in train nerdery, that type of focus is the majority, where in these other communities, it's the minority. That is a speculative guess.
It could be because trains in the United States have fallen so far that the train nerds have, by and large, are more overlapping with historical things.
I can see that.
There are people who do the classic cars. There are people who do the old planes at the air show.
Yeah.
Right. But I think maybe it could be that there's a great overlap of the train nerds with history, as a percentage a percentage of overall train nerds being historic train nerds, where I think a lot of car nerds are like modern car nerds.
But also, you can make physical working model railroads with accurate switching and simulate a terrifying percentage of real world train stuff. Can't really do that with cars or planes in your basement.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that the train nerds also have an element of real world preservation, at least in the United States, of
remember even in Beacon,
right?
there was
there might be an airfield here or there that someone is worked preserving and turning into a museum. There might cars, like there aren't really maybe an old racetrack or something here or there,
but go to any town that has a defunct railroad, there is a society of like 3 guys with beards who are dedicated to restoring it.
There are old stations and train tracks all over the place that have little foundations that are turning them into museums and preserving them and checking
in Beacon, where we lived, there used to be a hotel and a ski resort at the top of the mountain in Beacon, like in town. And we go hike up there a lot. There was also a railroad, an incline railroad that went from Beacon, like downtown, up the mountain to this hotel. And it was dilapidated. It went out of service in like the 50s. And then some vandals burned it down, like what was left it in the 70s. While we were living there, there was a very vocal society of, I'm pretty sure, exactly 7 men, all of whom had white beards. And they were desperately, constantly, aggressively trying to raise money to rebuild that incline railroad and then run it.
Right, because even though this collapse happened, the collapse it was within the lifetimes of not it was slightly before our lifetime, but well within the lifetimes of many, many people who are still alive, right? And are still of sound mind, and they're like, "Hey, I remember a time where there was all this awesome shit, and all that shit is gone." Right?
The Metro North train that used to go from Beacon across into Connecticut was still active, while many people who are alive today, like they're still alive. Like that was active in living memory.
Right. I mean, well, you think about like us, like I guess, in terms of our memory of the heyday would be like the 90s, right? And it's like, but none of us are out there like, bring back malls with all this garbage in them, right? But it's like we have, memories of that, of like a time where there were like these things that existed that were built up and awesome that then went away. But if the things that we remember for the 90s being built up and awesome that went away were actually like useful things.
Actually awesome.
Right. Like I would be, if it wasn't shopping malls, I would be like, hey, earlier in my life, shit was cool and that shit is all gone. What the
You know what? Here's something. There's one thing from our childhood, arcades. We're literally some of the youngest people who experienced an era where there were multiple arcades in every town.
Yeah, but the problem is like we sort of recognize that like bringing back arcades isn't really, great. It's like,
I think bringing back...
It's not really worth trying to bring back, and you couldn't bring it back in the way it was, and just plenty of people are preserving the machines.
True.
And you can set them up anywhere, and like that's fine.
But similarly, we don't want to bring back the trains from the 70s. We want to make trains in 2022s. I don't want to bring back the exact details of a 1989 arcade, but there's aspects of what happened in arcades and what those structures were that I want to reinvent and bring back. What stops that is primarily, actually, I think, the fact that the people who want those new experiences mostly live in cities, and because of capitalism, it is literally impossible to pay the rent on the space you would need to have a place like that.
Arcade doesn't really make economic sense in most places.
Nope. But if somehow you could have an arcade...
Even in Japan, you can see the arcades are closing.
If you could somehow have arcades in New York City...
the pandemic, they
would be packed. Look at Barcade, which kind of sucks because it's so loud and so crowded.
They make all their money from booze. It's like,
but
make the money from the games.
The arcade games also, people are packed 4 deep waiting in line to play. They're desperate to play the games. It's so packed, you're trying to like shove your way through the crowd.
They're just drunk, so they don't realize how crappy it is to play a lot of those games.
Yeah. That's me at MagFest.
Or, the games are there for the social aspect, right? It's like,
I really miss the social aspect of just playing competitive games with strangers in person.
Yeah, me too. But I also miss, you know what I miss? Train. I just rode one, but
I miss the internet before spam existed. That used to exist.
There were no such thing. I want the internet was spam way before we got on there.
Nah, well, depends what. So early email, I never got spam. I didn't have any spam filters.
AOL right away.
I didn't use AOL because I wasn't stupid.
I'm not like I was choosing the internet service. I got off AOL pretty quickly.
I only used AOL. So I used burner AOL accounts with free trials to do shady shit, but I never used AOL on purpose for real for anything other than shady shit in my entire youth.
That's what my family was using until I got my own computer in like 98, 99. Then I got my own service from the phone company. But even that, I got spam. I got to RIT, got spam. It's like
I remember RIT. I got my first spam email. It wasn't until RIT because I reported it to RIT's like IT department. I forwarded it to abuse@rit.edu, and I was like, "What the fuck is this email that came to me?"
I had spam pre-RIT from non-AOL. Anyway, trains are awesome, and even in places that do trains right, at least there are some such places in the world.
Yep.
It's really like train is the way to go for a lot of things. There's not enough train.
Yep. And if you're interested in what it could look like, not to build a new bullet train, we know what that looks like. Actually, the president, Biden, has a proposal specifically for that.
We'll call it high-speed rail.
Yeah. Well, it's high-speed rail because there's different levels of rail. Anyway, there is a real plan to build a train network in America that would transform American society. It's being aggressively pushed by our president and one of our political parties and being filibustered by the other political party.
Oh, yeah.
But in New York City, there's some old freight rail that goes out through like the back right corner of the city, like the back of Queens and down into Brooklyn. And
More
it's
like the middle of Queens.
yeah, it's not the back. It's more like it's the part of Queens that does not have a lot of mass transit. Like subway stops are few and far between.
Anyway, they want to put trains on tracks that are just sitting there already, right?
So despite the fact
to do a little bit of work on it to hook them up to existing other places.
Yep, the proposal is basically, hey, this old rail line would be really useful. Why don't we just put platforms on it and run trains on it for people? And early studies showed that even though this just is random freight track that already exists, and you can't really pick where it goes, like it's gonna go where it already goes. So it just picks this semi-random path through some of the outer parts of some of the outer boroughs. They estimate that its ridership would be huge just because people are so desperate to be able to get places not in a car.
Yep. The end. Trains are the best.
Easy show.
Okay.